I'm a New Yorker, and I did my undergrad at Potsdam, SUNY Potsdam, Crane School of Music. And at the time when I went there, it was Tim McAllister was the teacher, and so I started as a music ed major, and I promptly switched to performance for one degree, and then musical studies, which is their degree, which encompassed you either did composition or you did theory and history, and I did theory history. And so I did 2 degrees there, and had essentially it was a really great learning experience because that was kind of the foundation for the Chops books. Was because Tim at the time, and I think still does, was using a really extensive studio packet, and his studio packet, his technique packet. It involved, pedagogy from flute, from clarinet books, from everything, and stuff that he had written, and it was just really, quite comprehensive. And I was frankly encouraged with all the technique that he had us working on to extend it beyond, what was there. So he had us using the Londex Legam intervals book, and once you'd completed it, he was encouraging you to extend, and similar thing with all of our scale work. And then when I got to Michigan for my master's and doctorate, and so I started at Potsdam in 2003, started at Michigan in 2007, and when I got there, one of the things that most everybody knows about Don is that he is very committed practicer very early in the morning, and so
How early are we talking?
Oh, well, usually by 6, because I
Oh.
tried to beat him there several times. And I only got him a few times. And so essentially he would get there around 6 a.m. And so, frankly, I was just being a very creepy stalker student. I wanted to hear him play. I wanted to know, what Don was working on at this point.
Yeah.
And so I showed up, and I would practice down the hallway from him, and just I'd be practicing, but also doing a lot of listening to everything he was doing with rep, with fundamentals, and then I created my own routine that I did, and he ended up listening to that, to what I was doing, and because at the time I was really experimenting with range and with adapting some new voicing things to practice and extending things from his book, and really thinking about technique in a very much a 3.5 octave way. Because that's something even I heard in high school was that, nowadays it's just expected that you play the full range. And yet, when
Yeah.
you look at all the literature, really no books had that range.
Yeah, no,
The only ones that
100%.
did were the books that were specifically to teach you how to do it, which was Don's book, Eugene Rousseau's book, the Rosemary Lang book, and, Rasher's book, obviously, Top Tones. But there were no, like, scale books or fundamental books that really incorporated that, and that's what my routine there was about. So, long story short, where the Chops book comes from is that he gave me a class to teach to his undergrads, and it was called Chops.
Yeah.
And it was just quite plainly teaching his undergrads to do everything that he heard me doing in the morning, and then some, and a few other things. And so that's when I started really going through. In the summer before preparing for that, I think I played through every method book that he had, and just found try to get the best ideas from all those, and realized that at these days, a master's level, I'm a decent player. I can play through all of these method books pretty damn quickly, and there's not a whole lot of challenge there. Whereas when you go to our repertoire, it is quite challenging, and so there was a
Yeah.
gulf between technique book here, repertoire, right here. It really push, or crazy Laube etudes and in various pieces like way up here, and then technique books. And I didn't think that made a whole lot of sense. So beyond that, I started exploring a lot of flute and clarinet methods. And the interesting thing about that is, that's what I'll just sort of close my introduction on, is that the books that they still use that are almost 100 years old are actually still contemporary for them. They're written with a range that they play in now. I
Yeah.
mean, Taffanel and Gobert, book, for example, goes up to, I think, a high B or a high C. Really, they're practicing their technique maybe a whole step higher than that, at that point. And that's, a century old. Whereas, a century old for us is the DeVille method, which I don't even think has an F sharp in it. And
Yeah, yeah.
saxophones have come a long way since pre-World War One.
A little bit.
On
You'd
the
hope so, right?
jazz and classical side. I mean,
Yeah.
because quite plainly back then, what we know as jazz didn't exist, and classical players, weren't playing nearly what they're doing now. Um, and the thing about it was that there are books out right now that have all the multiphonics that teach you the quarter tone fingerings that'll describe how to slap tone and all that stuff. At the basic level though of our fundamentals, the stuff that you see in all the other technique books, the really revered ones for all the other instruments, we need an update.
No.
Because even the books that I use that I recommend people study before they study mine, like the Kiniston Daily Studies and the Larry Teal Daily Studies, and then of course the Lagam Londex Lagam book. The latest one of those was written in the early '70s.
Yeah.
And
No,
again,
that's
saxophone has come a long way in 50 years. So that's where the inspiration came from. It's something I've been thinking about forever. It was kind of like the subject of my practicing when I was a grad student, and then global pandemic hits, all my gigs get canceled, and I think, well, I've been talking about this forever and making my own studio packets that have little bits of my own exercise. It's like, I'm never going to have this kind of time again.
that's 100% accurate. You
So,
definitely capitalized on all of a sudden having every day completely open for sure.
oh, yeah,
Um,
long summer.
yeah.